Hi all. I hope you're having a good Friday or Saturday or whenever it is that you might be seeing this. I'm putting this together now after class so that you have an opportunity to reflect on it in anticipation of the assignments for the week. As I don't want it to seem like there's a whole lot of different things, and I felt like as we were going through it at the end of class, it sounded like 2 spirals, 2 drawings, and stuff like that. So I want to create a little bit of a container in which to place these. So yes, the reading for this week is a reading on solitude, and we talked a little bit about where that's going. The key is to, as you read this chapter, think about it in relationship to mindfulness practices, the ways that they're very different, and yet in some cases how they really come together. Because I think that your consideration of solitude, the way we're going to be exploring it, can really open up avenues of practice for well-being and for concentration and focus and the cultivation of greater present moment awareness, more than just the handful of mindfulness practices that you have learned and will do, or more fully understanding why those practices can be helpful in addition to just the rigid instruction that the practice seems to carry. So that would be the reading on solitude. You'll note that for this week's reading, I don't have the observation thing in the reading. I took it out to avoid the confusion that I think I was creating by having it in 2 places, especially when they didn't say the exact same thing. So what's in the back is easy access for you to be able to make note of your observations, and then when we get together in class, just be able to tear it off and turn it in. After the reading on solitude, you'll then have it where there's an opportunity for you to make notes, things that you might want to have to talk about in class or just to remember for yourself. Then there are the pages on creativity. Now, as many of you are, and as we will from time to time, avail ourselves of this space to actually have one of your practices be a practice where you're drawing or you're using the crayons as part of your focused attention, or however you construe that practice. And so they're really there for you to be able to draw upon and to draw on as part of your exploration of mindfulness, or, as we'll be exploring next week, solitude. However, in addition to whatever you choose to do or not do with the space that you're given, there is the creative assignment. There's 2 of them. So during the course of the next week, on 2 days, that would be the preferred way to do it, as opposed to just getting them done as an assignment. They're really not assignments. They're opportunities to cultivate what we're learning and exploring together, but to draw you in solitude, whatever that means after reading solitude, to let that be a creative consideration. And then the other one is So Be Mindful You, and that draws upon, the movement practices we've been doing, especially outside. So 2 opportunities to sit and to do a little creative expression using the crayons, and those will be turned in. There's also 2 spirals, and this is what I wanted to just clarify further as well. Now that you've been introduced to the spiral in last week's reading, and now that we spent a little time talking about it in class on the board, and now that you'll perhaps, just as you previously maybe noticed snow globe moments, you'll be more aware of spiral moments. And the only difference between the snow globe moment and the spiral moment is snow globe is more general. We know that we're feeling antsy. We get a sense that, there's a lot of noise or static, and that the thoughts, feelings, and sensations are, of an agitated sort. With the spiral, we take that and have a more granular examination, that there's thoughts and feelings and sensations that are in many ways uncomfortable and unpleasant, and so we overreact by doing something that oftentimes is not useful or helpful or constructive. Sometimes it is, even if coming out of a reactive state. But it's primarily directed towards feeling better, to reducing the agitation of the thoughts, feelings, and sensations. And so we want to notice when that is our motivation, when that is what's impelling us to say or do or not say or not do something. And then the ways our spirals can become other people's spirals, when the thing that we do is an overreaction then becomes the event or the life happening to somebody else that gets their spiral going. Because it's useful to notice this. Notice this within ourselves. Notice this in our relationships with others. And we'll continue to explore that. So since we've talked about this in a somewhat abstract way, maybe putting a little bit of it to words, now this is your opportunity to take spiral moments and to make them a little bit more tangible. So this week, at some point in time, you will likely have a spiral moment. It'll be an unpleasant circumstance, whatever it is. It could involve another person. It need not involve another person. It could just be a message that you received or information you learned. And the snow globe will get going, and you'll realize that, and the spiral will be happening. And of course, those come together. But now you'll say, well, I wonder what thoughts I'm having. And you'll write them down. Or maybe upon reflection, you'll be like, what thoughts might I have been having? And you'll fill out the spiral as well as any possible overreactions. And then make note of your observations. So at least one day this week, let an experience that was a little bit unpleasant be the motivation to take this out and fill it in. Now, that's required. That's asked for. The other, which is optional, and I really do mean optional, is to have it where you do it when you're talking with somebody and you're choosing not to interrupt them. Now, do not interrupt is being asked for you to do this week. And I'll send a text that says D&I, and that'll be a little reminder if you haven't already remembered it, to see if you can go a day without interrupting. And that's something we will talk about next week. What was it like to go a day with the intention to not interrupt? And as we talked about in class, it doesn't mean you have to go the whole day and not say something. Certainly it doesn't mean that. But not say something while somebody else is saying something. It doesn't even mean that. As we'll explore, our interactions with each other are much more nuanced. But this will give you an opportunity to notice for yourself, and everyone's different, so I can't speak for what you'll notice, but people tend to realize, wow, I sort of interrupt more than I realized, or wow, even when I try not to, I feel this impulse to interrupt. And given that we're now looking at the spiral, it's not just an impulse not to interrupt, it's some thoughts that we might be having and some feelings that we might be experiencing and some sensations in the body. And we actually use it as an opportunity, those moments, to notice, to observe, to experience more fully that what tends to be slightly uncomfortable. Alrighty, so please do the do not interrupt at least once as an intention. And perhaps, if you found it instructive and you remember, to fill out the spiral for the do not interrupt. But you need not do the second spiral. Then there is the very important give thought to, and I encourage you to give thought to. Don't just do it, Thursday night. But give thought to some of the considerations regarding your paper. And a couple of the questions really will ask you to think about something. It'll ask you to think about the challenge and the obstacle, which we talked about today. Right now, if I were to say, what is the difference between a challenge and an obstacle? I suspect that it's still fuzzy, but you probably got it when we were talking in class. So I'll speak to it just for a moment, but the challenge is the thing that happens, and the obstacle is the way we relate to and perhaps resist the thing that happens. Mindfulness can't stop things from happening, but they can very much change the way we relate to the things that are happening. And you'll be identifying, for purposes of this assignment, at least one of the challenges and obstacles that would be relevant to the paper topic that you're writing about. And there's also, take some time and do some research, not necessarily Lexis or Westlaw research, but internet research, as well as perhaps some legal research on mindfulness and the subject matter that you're interested in, to see what's out there, to get an idea. And it asks you to write down maybe 5 of those. So nothing to turn in this week prior to class. Things to bring to class. And then the last is you will be doing the daily practice. And the daily practice is one that brings together the mindfulness practices you've been learning to pick and choose among them as you would like to. It's your choice now. I encourage adhering to some of them. It really takes a little while for them to get in gear, but I also want you to have and realize you've always had the freedom to navigate around that, and the solitude discussion will open the door to that. And I hope that the 10% Happier podcast and listening to the wonderful guest that Dan Harris interviewed offered you something to think about in terms of a very successful, just like you, accomplished, high, drive, or however you regard yourself, person might draw upon mindfulness, and to draw upon it and curate it in a way that resonates with you, to achieve for some of the things that she spoke to. She spoke to reducing anxiety. She spoke to, which I think is very poignant and powerful, not needing something or someone to be okay. It's wonderful to have things, and it's wonderful to be in relationship to people, that's for sure. Those are cherished, experiences in life, but not to need it to be okay. There's an interesting distinction there, and perhaps when she spoke to that, if that resonated with you, then it resonates with you, and if it didn't mean much to you, then it doesn't mean much to you. But perhaps to have some of the things that she shared further inspire and motivate you in your journey through mindfulness, and also perhaps to check out some of the other podcast interviews that Dan Harris does. Alrighty, with that, if you have any questions, please let me know. I look forward to seeing you next Friday.